Hey there, you're listening to the Visions, Missions, and Manifestations podcast, the number one place for spirituality, healing, and transcendence. I'm your host, Vivian Raquel Diane. Now let's get into it. I am beaming. Okay, this is like, I don't even know what this is. This is just the coolest thing ever. Thank
Oh,
you
I'm
for
so
being
honored to
here.
be here.
Thank you. I'm speaking from firsthand experience when I say that today's guest transforms lives. Meeting Amanda Blair was one of the first connections that led me to where and who I am today. She's a relationship coach who helps humans manifest the love they deserve. Along the way, she takes you on a trip to self discovery, self transformation, and overall to the next level of your life. Amanda Blair, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you so much. That introduction is going to make me cry. It's so sweet. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's so cool that you're doing this. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. I just looked at your post earlier today about New Year and how it's not really a time to be, go, 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 doing, and more in a time of,
No.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to speak a
We're in
little.
winter. Yeah, that's something that I've really been, I think, settling into and sinking into um, since leaving New York. I left New York in 2022, like the summer of 2022. And once I left, there was just a lot more space and room for me to be like, wow, I can just relax. And so there felt like a lot less like self pressure to like perform and do and like be out there because that is so New York. That vibe is, it's like hustle, 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 which is part of what makes New York magical, right? But it also is exhausting. And so moving to Portland has really, which is exactly why I moved. I wanted to like slow way, 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 way down and just really like relax and enjoy. And that is what I've been doing and what Portland has allowed for me. And so as I think about the new year and this, pressure we put on ourselves, which is super arbitrary because like sure it's the beginning of like the year, but like just because someone says it is, you know what I mean? Like that can be whenever. And
Mhm.
so just reminding ourselves that winter is a time of rest. It's a time of hibernation. It's if you think about like Mother Nature, right? Like her soil is not bearing fruit. Her soil is not, producing seedlings. It's resting. And we want to do that for ourselves as well, because doing so is what allows us to bear that fruit and to bloom in the spring and summer. And if we're just like pushing, 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 we're never allowing for the full like maturation of the seeds we want to plant, right? They're just
It's
like
so,
not
so
going to
true.
grow. They're going to be stunted. And I think really allowing ourselves to trust that it's okay to hibernate, it's okay to rest, it's okay to slow down is also such a revolution in like in regards to like the patriarchy and like capitalism. So that's really this year I'm like really thinking about. I think, resolutions or like thinking about your year should like be super seasonal. So you're allowing yourself whatever like season your body is actually in. So, what do you want to think about calling in for your period of winter and hibernation? And then what do you want to think about calling in spring? And what do you want to call in summer? Because those are going to be, various things and fall. Um, those are going to be really different and as they should be. And so we can't hold ourselves to like this one standard, right? I think that again, that's like so patriarchal. Let's like let it be varied.
And what I love about that is how you also connected it to New York City in the beginning, how New York, as the city at least as a whole, is about
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you could take a step back and tune into yourself and just be like, hey, wait a second, who am I being? It's just so interesting because we are human beings. We're not human doings, yet we're the majority of the time focusing on the doing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what am I doing to be? What am I doing to perform? What am I doing to have? Like, all these things of action based, and we kind of lose that connection with like, okay, wait, who am I being? Who do I want to be? How do I want to feel like? And let me just get shift myself, recalibrate into feeling how I want to feel and show up in the world. So
Totally. Absolutely. And
it
it's
just felt
softness, like I think a lot of times we can feel so scared to like lean into that softness, or if we want to use like the feminine. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to lean into. Like I love winter because I love the like tuning in and the hibernation and like the coziness. Like I want to be in my sweats inside, and I love that there is a season for that, because then when it's summer, I'm like out, I want to be out, I want to be in the river, I want to be hiking, I want to be doing all the things. And like that, this rest like allows me to do that more, right? So it's like
exactly.
it allows you to like really lean in, which I like.
And it also gives you the time to do that so that you can
Mm-hmm.
show up for summer for this more like
Right.
outward phase of like the year in a
Exactly.
more focused way, in a more present way. But this is
Yeah.
really cool. So a few years ago, 2 years ago, you moved to Portland from New York.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what else has shifted since you moved? So I know
Oh,
that you manifested the most divine relationship.
I did. Yeah. That has been lovely. I mean, a lot has shifted. I think, I was just in New York for the weekend. I was visiting my best friend, and she just had twin babies, which is like, it was so magical and special because they're still newborns. And it was such a special time to be there and to like see them and see her and her partner, Tommy, who I also love, just like become parents and like witness this time. Like, just such, like, I can't stress how special it was. But when I was there, I was like literally in their apartment because they have newborn babies. So like we were not doing much. But I did do one errand because I wanted to get a charm necklace, and I wanted to get Salwa and I this chai that we had both been wanting to try. And so I did that one errand, and it took me to Greenpoint, which is where I lived for a very long time. And so like I walked by my old apartment, and I, walked down the streets I used to walk to. And I have been back a lot since I've moved. But I've been there like with Zach, my partner, or I was like with people more. And I really just got like a couple hours to just like be by myself and walk the streets of New York, which is like, that is the New York I know. I spent so much time just like being alone and like walking those streets, but like walking by my old apartment specifically, I was just like, oh my, I was just like flashed to my old self of like walking down these streets and remembering, this makes me emotional, but just like dreaming of the life that I have now. And I'm like, oh, I'm just like so grateful for that old self and that past me who just like knew and made the choices and did the things to like get me to where I am now. So I think everything has shifted. It's very much like a continuation of my evolution in terms of like who I am. Like I feel I can like see my evolution of that. Like there's times in my life, when I was in my young 20s, I don't even know that person anymore. That's like, I'm very different from that person. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, I grow, but I stay somewhat closer to me because I'm more authentic. But my life has shifted in terms of like its pace. It's like drastically slowed, which again I was like pursuing and I wanted. I'm back in school. I'm in grad school to become a um, marriage and family therapist, which I'm really stoked about. I have
Congratulations.
Thank you. I have two kittens, which whom I love, and they keep us on our toes because they are very rambunctious and they just love to cause mischief. I'm in a beautiful relationship that, is everything that I was calling in. And um, yeah, like life right now is really about like family and
Mm.
just like sort of like creating that family, where my life in New York was like really solo and like about friends. And so it's just, yeah, it feels like a deepening, and I'm like really pursuing the life I actually want versus when I was in New York. I had originally wanted that. I spent my whole life wanting to be in New York, but and there was many years of like really that was the life that I wanted. But there got to be a certain point where I was living like the way that I thought I should be, not what I actually wanted to. So now I'm just really in like, I'm living the life I want. This is the lifestyle I desire. You know, this is what feels the best for me, especially when I go back to New York and I can compare.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course, I miss my friends, and I especially miss right now being close to Salwa and like not being able to see the babies as much as I want. Like, that sucks. But I don't miss that lifestyle.
Right.
Well, I do miss how easy it is to walk everywhere because, like, goddamn, you're walking to like commute, and so you're just racking up those steps, and it's so hard here, to like really get like good walks in. So that I do miss, but everything else I don't. And yeah, it's like it's cool to go back and be like, this. I'm so happy I left,
You
and
grew
to
out
just
of
feel
it.
like, yeah, very much so, and feel very at home here and where just my life is. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
You definitely did. And I want to just remind you and the listeners who might not know you as well as I got to know you since 2020, um,
Yeah.
something that you always or you posted multiple times that you would talk
Mm-hmm.
about that really hit home for me when you would post it was I'm so thankful to my past self who knew that
Oh,
future me would want this. Even if
yeah.
it was just like the smallest thing to get you like prepared for bed before you went out, or like it was a food that you prepared that you'd have at home. It wasn't like something so extravagant, and you'd come home and be like, I'm so proud of my past self for making this decision for me. And
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh my God, that's such a cool concept that like we could like me at the time, like I never thought about my future self in relatively a short future self. Like when we think of our future self, I think we have the habit of thinking of us in like 5, 10 years from now, not
Hmm.
in 2 hours. And
Right.
it, in some ways, I feel like your journey in New York was you making the right decisions, at least at the
Hmm.
last like 3 years in New York, making the decisions for you to meet the divine partner, to make the move to a place or a state that actually puts you in a good state of mind, right?
Yeah,
So, in
totally.
a lot of ways, it was this transition from old self, preparing yourself for new self, and you were able to move into that so beautifully and effortlessly. Like, and
Hmm.
that's something
Yeah.
to really know about yourself and what other people could do too when transforming or transitioning phases in their life.
And that is sometimes, more of like the future self. But a lot of times it's just like thinking about myself a week from now, or, yeah, setting myself up for like the morning. Um, and it's just a way of caring for myself, right? Like I take good care of myself. I parent myself well. I love myself well because that is the foundation of everything.
And as human beings, we're not born knowing these things. So, what do you think shifted in your life that mirrored this lesson to you? Hey, Amanda, Blair, um, taking care of yourself, nurturing yourself, and loving yourself is going to lead you to a life that feels amazing.
I mean, I think everything led me there, different teachers and mentors, and like my own sort of like learning and growth is just like pointed me in the direction of that. And like that's, sort of my philosophy that I work with clients on. It's like at the end of the day, it always comes down to you. Like right now, I am a relationship coach, which oftentimes means I'm focusing with people on their love lives. But really, what I mean by that is we're focusing on your relationship to self, because again, that
Mm-hmm.
is the foundation of everything. So I, like everything led me there. um, I can't just say like there was one specific thing, it's like when I look back, hindsight is 2020. So I can like see my through line. Um, but that, I've always been a seeker. I've always been someone who's very growth oriented. I've always been someone who really sought that out. And so, that is just the like truth that I've, been, when I was younger trying to hone in on, and then, kind of found it. And now I just like kind of circle around it.
And you've embodied those things which
And
led you
yes,
here.
absolutely. Yeah. Totally.
So I guess what I'm getting at is there like a rule, quote unquote, or a belief you had to break in order to manifest the version you are now?
Yeah, actually. I mean, I think two big ones, but like I think the main one that really, really started shifting a lot for me, was I am capable. I felt very uncapable my whole life, mostly because I grew up with really young parents and I come from a lot of trauma. I had a really traumatic background, and so I didn't have a lot of encouragement. I had a lot of discouragement. I had a lot of criticism. And so, as a little kid, you absorb that into your subconscious, and then that's the pattern that you live from. And so I was living that out as an adult until I really stumbled into, oh, I am capable. And like once that hit, it was like, okay, shit. Well, then what, I can do it. Not that there won't be challenges, because of course there still have been so many challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But now I view things as like, I am capable and I can pursue that. And I don't, this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but another one of my philosophies is like, the how and when of something isn't really our business. That's the universe's business. Our business is our why and our worth, right? So I might be like, okay, I want to do this thing, and I don't know how the hell that's going to happen, but I know that's not my business, so I don't have to worry about that. What I do know is I can do it. I'm capable of it. And there will be challenges along the way. And I trust that my future self will meet those and like have the tools. And if I can think of a way that I can set myself up for that now, I will. And if I don't have that information, then I'm not going to worry about it, because like I will be led there. Right. So I think that has been the most major thing that I always go back to if I'm like in a new sort of layer of something and working through
Mm.
something. I'm like, right, because I am capable. So I can, pursue whatever or take on the challenge, and the how I know will come through and it will lead me, and like the when will come in when it's meant to, and like I really can be in like full trust with that.
This makes sense, especially as you were saying how you came from a background which was like really discouraging. So to be able to
Mm-hmm.
reparent yourself and say, I'm actually capable, and I'm sure so many other people are probably like, okay, but how did you go from being in a family that discouraged you to like
Mm-hmm.
breaking that like veil, that disbelief, and kind of being like, wait a
Yeah.
second, actually I am very capable. What, like, how do you, and then how do you
Yeah.
reinforce that? Because it's one
Yeah.
thing for like if somebody's constantly being told that like that's not possible for you, like absolutely no way, and then somebody says, yeah, well actually you are capable, you're gonna like your gut reaction is gonna be like, no, you don't know, I actually am not capable, right? So like
Right.
how did you reinforce that to
Yeah.
let it become your
Well,
identity?
so, the way that I got there is a lot of work, the work that I teach. And, I had many teachers and people that helped me along the way to that. But, it's basically what I teach clients now and how I work with clients. Like that's how I got myself there. So when I have people come in and they're like, I can't and I can't and this won't and I won't, and I'm like, I fucking know, I've been there, but I also have gotten to the other side. So like, let me guide you, right? If I can do it, you can do it. And then the way that I reinforced it, um, honestly, like this sounds so silly, but I had always wanted to be a runner, didn't, but never felt capable. Um, and then as I started to really step into this idea of like, I am capable, I got sober. That was like the first thing that I was like, fuck, I can do hard things.
Oh yeah.
And I stayed sober. I've been sober for 7 years now. It was 7 years on the first. And I started running the same year I got sober, which is actually a lot of people get sober and start running. It's just like a thing. It's like a transfer of energy. But running long distance, like I was running up to 15 miles. And because I was originally thinking I wanted to do a marathon, I have since done a half marathon. And I was like, that's enough. I don't need to run 26 miles. Like, that's half a marathon is like a beautiful distance. It's fun. Cool. I don't need to prove anymore. But doing that, I was like, fucking A, like I am capable. I never thought I could run 15 miles. I never thought I could run a half marathon, and I did it. And so from there would be like, I want to save $10,000, did it. I want to travel around Southeast Asia, did it. Like, I want to do this, did it. And I could just look back and go, you can do this. Look,
I
remember you did
absolutely
this.
can. I
Right.
absolutely can.
And it's not that there wasn't challenges when those things, there were, but I had now a track record of like just allowing myself to pursue something and doing it, not doing it perfectly, not
You still
I
did
think
it.
people, yeah,
You
people,
created a history for yourself to
totally.
reference, to show
Right.
yourself like actually my history states that I can.
Right.
It's like
Right.
you changed your DNA.
Totally. So, but it's not, I think people assume like if they're going to do something, they need to get like critical acclaim for it, right? There needs to be like, there's all like this fanfare or like it's done perfect or what. And it's not, if that doesn't happen, like it's nothing worthwhile. Like, because I did those things didn't mean any of that happened. Like, it wasn't like, I won a Nobel Prize because I found out I was capable, but that's okay, right? That doesn't, if I wanted to win one, I'm sure I could go pursue that goal. That's not something that I've ever thought about, but it's, if you're doing it, do it for you and your growth. And then you have a track record of doing that thing. And then you can look back when you want to do the next thing that feels challenging. And you could be like, remember, we can trust ourselves because look what we did here. So start with something small, like if you're like, I can't journal, challenge yourself to journal for 5 minutes a day and like complete that for 30 days. And then you'll be like, well, shit, I can do it. Like, what else can I, you can like start really small and build into it. Um, so I think, also reinforcing that was really learning how to trust myself. And, through learning how to trust myself, that helps me then love myself more. That helps me then recognize my worth more, right? Because what I also recognized in this process of like, I am capable was my worth didn't hinder on anything. So I wasn't more worthy because I could run 15 miles, but like I enjoyed that I could do it and like the challenge. I wasn't more worthy because of any of these things that I started doing. I just recognized like, oh, I already am worthy and I desire this. So I'm going to allow myself to do it. Whereas before I didn't feel worthy and I didn't feel capable. So I would be like, well, I can't do that. So I'm not going to. Right. And yeah, that's just like something that I continue on in today. If like something comes up, like I had a new layer come up of, I have these real stories in my head about how I can't be creative. And Zach is always like, you can learn because he's like a very talented artist and he's actually really good at just basically anything he does, which is really annoying. But he's a very talented artist and he's always like, you can learn. And I'm like, no, I can't. I have the story. No, I can't. Right.
You have this block.
And so I'm really starting to recognize that. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh, that's a wound, right? That's my inner child wound. And I can learn. And I don't need to be a prolific artist who is like in the MoMA. But I can create, right?
Right.
I can let myself, which is where that, this whole like theme for 2024 came in. I can let myself do that. I can let myself learn. I can let myself be creative and take it where it takes me, right? And it doesn't need to be, again, end up in some like huge achievement or doesn't need to be monetized. It doesn't need to be recognized
Right.
out externally. It's just I can pursue those things. So now even when I find something new that I'm like, ooh, yeah, I'm living in a story there, I apply the same sort of work to it.
It really sounds like you were able to build up the trust with yourself
Mm-hmm.
and your word. So based off your history, it's like, okay, if I say I can do this, I can because all of these things
Mm-hmm.
happened for me when I said I would do them because I went after them.
Mm-hmm.
And now with this creativity, it sounds like because you put in the work with all the other things, like, I
Mm-hmm.
can run, I did run, I can be in a relationship, I'm in a really divine relationship. All of these things, I can move, I moved. You kept proving and making your word impeccable. I feel like for you, reparenting this creativity is going to be more like, I can be creative
Yeah.
and then going after it. And like you said, right? You have these stories, which is also a creative thing in of itself, and just being the creative person that you are now desiring to be because you have the history to back up whatever you say you're going to do because you've
Hmm.
done the things you follow through on your
Hmm.
word,
Totally.
which I
Absolutely.
really, really like. Hey there, it's Vivian, and I'm briefly interrupting this episode because I'm so excited to share that if this episode is lighting you up, then I know that us working together in my new one-on-one packages is going to be the thing that you forever utilize as the resource, power tool, and hands-on experience for your manifestation success practice. I'm so excited that I've opened this up and I have like 3 spots available right now. I'm going to actually link how to sign up and apply in the show notes, but you can also send me a DM because I want to make sure that this is a hell yes fit for you. But the type of people that I typically work with are people who are ready to manifest more abundance, success, fulfillment, and love into their lives. And right now, I have space for about 3 people in my 3-month packages. I also have a really fun new way to work together in person, in real life. So reach out if this is something that you're interested in. Okay, now back to the episode. So, on your website, you have this phrase. It says, tired of dating the wrong people,
Hmm.
ready to stop settling for less than you deserve. And then you're like, book a session. And I was reading that. And when we started working with each other in 2020, I remember reading that on your website and being like, absolutely, yes. Like, I'm ready. I'm ready. And looking back, I was like, yeah, I don't want this anymore. Like, I was so done. I was actually thinking about it today, like where my mindset was when I started coaching with you. I didn't necessarily hate my life. I want to be clear
Hmm.
about that. But I also knew there was so much more for me. I was in a place where I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, this is not what I want. But it wasn't bad.
Hmm.
I didn't feel like I could complain in any way. It just was like I just was looping on cycles and I'm like, get me off of this roller coaster. Like, what is this? There's so much, so much, so much more. And I was also really ready for the work. I was like, I will do whatever it takes to just manifest a different love. At the time, I wanted to manifest the one, but when we finished working with each other and when I manifested my then partner, what I really was so grateful for and so stunned by was I didn't just learn how to manifest love. I really felt like I learned the rules of life, all these skill sets that I just never knew existed. I didn't know they were a thing. I
Hmm.
was like, wait a second, boundaries, like that was so foreign to me. Like, I remember,
That
like,
is foreign for a lot of my clients. Yes.
it was, I remember a year before I started working with you. Okay. Somebody told me that I had no boundaries and I was so proud of it. I'm like, yeah, I don't have any boundaries. I'm an open book. Like, why? I'm just so open and free. I don't have boundaries. And like, I think on that a lot. And I'm like, oh, Vivian.
Yeah. Boundaries is actually what allows you to be open.
uh, right. They let you be safe. They let you
Yeah.
actually like pivot into relationships, not just like love relationships, but friendships that
Hmm.
aren't toxic, that feel
Yeah.
healthy and that you can
Yeah.
feel supported in.
Hmm.
So,
Without them, you're not actually open. You're actually probably very shut off. You just don't recognize it.
so shut off. I had no idea. Like, I thought yeah, I would say that in a lot of ways, from a very young age, for as long as I can remember, I was a very aware person. And I remember just always feeling like I was shadows of myself. But I did have this feeling of just being like, I need to like come back to me. And I just would feel like being in these really unhealthy relationships, like this is life. Like this is what
Hmm.
relationships are. And I would like rather be alone and I'd be like, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't like going out. I don't want to go hang out with these people. And I didn't know why. I really just thought there was something wrong with me. And I thought that all people and all friendships were that way. And it wasn't
Hmm.
until you taught me these things like boundaries, and you taught me like about the importance of doing what you're going to say you're going to do and things like that, that I was like,
Hmm.
wait a second, this is so much more than manifesting love. This is like getting your power back and being
Yeah.
a person in
Yeah.
society.
Well, I think what, again, going back to like the relationship coach thing, helping people work on their relationship to self is I'm teaching clients how to really fall in love with themselves so that that's their foundation. They recognize their safety and security starts and ends with them. And so from that foundation, you can create a life that feels truthful to who you really are,
Mm.
not who your wounds taught you to be.
I love that because,
Right.
like you, I had a childhood where not that I wasn't capable, but if I thought a good thing about myself, it was like, you're cocky. Oh, you're full of it, or
Mm.
you're too confident.
That is what happens to us is, I feel like really millennials are the first generation in mass to have this like conversation about like mental health and wellness. I'm sure there was many people before in previous generations, but that I feel like they were more anomalies and that was really fringe. And we've like sort of brought this into the mainstream. Um, and so I feel like millennials are really the first parents who are trying to parent really consciously and trying to understand and process their own trauma so they're not passing that on. But before, it was really just generational trauma was just passing down and passing down. And, epigenetics, like we are in our mothers when they're in their mother. So it's like this just stuff just gets handed down and handed down and handed down. And I think it's such beautiful work to break that generational trauma, right? So for you
So,
to be able to claim a compliment and just accept it and be like, yeah, thank you. Like,
right.
wow, that's not a small thing. That is a huge deal. You're like quite literally breaking that for your whole ancestral line.
Right. And for
Like,
the future, for my future,
right.
transcend
Like,
that whole line.
that is huge, right? That is a revolution. That is so important. And I think that we, I think, culture right now with like wellness and like um, doing the work um, is really focused on the like external things, the manifestation things, and like a lot of manifestation rhetoric is it's really like, get this thing. And if you're not getting this thing, then like something's wrong. Like you got to focus on the thing. And to me, that is not how I think of it, right? Like I've talked about this in a recent video of like that centers the manifestation. Instead, we want to like center ourselves
Right.
and we are the point, right? Like our growth is the point. And things like that, moments like that, someone saying like, oh, you are so good at blah, blah, blah. And instead of doing what you were taught to do, and instead saying, oh my God, thank you so much. That is the point, right? That is worth
100%.
1,000, manifestations. Like
Thank you.
that is the point. You are the point. So the more I think we can really attune to ourselves, which will allow you one to build that foundation of security and safety, because that's ultimately what you're looking for is that attunement. But that will also help you notice those shifts and appreciate them and celebrate them because that is so important. It's not just like doing the work. We also have to acknowledge that work and celebrate that work.
For sure. For sure. Thank you for saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so right now you're focusing on loving, coaching people on loving themselves, but also when it does come to dating,
Yeah.
on that little blurb that you wrote on that you have on your website, tired of dating the wrong people. And I was thinking, like, how does one even come into recognition or awareness that they're dating the wrong person?
I mean, I think if you, much like you said before, where you were like, this is what relationships are. I think when you feel, depending on what your attachment style is, but like if you're someone who's coming from a more anxious attachment, if you constantly feel anxious, if you constantly feel uncertain, if you constantly feel terrified, you're not in the right relationship. because the relationship that's going to be healthy, that's going to last longer term, I don't believe in the one. So I'm not going to like preach to that, but I think we can have many long-term relationships and many the ones. Then that relationship is going to feel so different. It's going to feel safe. It's going to feel stable. It's going to feel consistent. And that you also have to be internally ready for, because when we're not internally ready for that, we'll be like, fucking boring. Don't want that person. Like when I was 25, not ready for that kind of relationship. I did have someone come in who was super emotionally available, super emotionally aware, like, wanted commitment. And I was like, you're boring. And like left because that I didn't know how to give myself those things. I was not emotionally available. I was not emotionally aware. I did not love myself. I could not receive that from someone else at that point because I was not ready to give that to me yet. That was still a long journey. So I think it's recognizing your unhappiness and like suffering that you are doing in a relationship. Someone who's more avoidant, just probably feeling very unsatisfied in a relationship, but probably sticking it out. Anyway, I think a lot of people have an assumption that someone who's avoidant will not be in a relationship, which can happen. But a lot of the time, someone who's more avoidant is going to be in the wrong relationship for a really long period of time
That
because
makes
they don't want
sense.
to rock the boat. They don't want to, say their needs. They're just going to like suppress. So they're just like, well, I guess this is what relationships are, like kind of shitty. And like, I'm just unhappy and I'm just going to be isolated in myself. But it's those sort of signals, right? And when someone builds that awareness is then when they can be like, okay, well, let's look here.
Right. And I guess everybody builds that awareness differently and at their own pace, and different things trigger that awareness.
Right,
So,
exactly.
the second part of the question on your website is ready to stop settling for less than you deserve. And how can the person who is in a relationship that, maybe doesn't feel right to them, they're in the wrong relationship,
Mm-hmm.
kind of come to terms with, okay, there is actually a possibility that there's something different that feels better for me out there?
How can they come to that realization?
How can they understand? Like, how can they understand whether or not they're settling? Like, how does one know if
Oh,
they're
how
settling?
can, yes. Yeah, this is a question that I get a lot in session. And I think that only like you can know, like that is such a personal thing.
Mm,
But I think to speak more generally, it would be if your needs aren't being met, right? So if your needs aren't being met in your relationship, and I would say that we are not perfect. We don't expect perfection. This isn't about finding perfection. Like, though I have a beautiful relationship that I love and is what I want, it is not perfect, right? I'm not perfect. My partner isn't perfect. So we're not looking or seeking perfection or trying to be perfect. But if there is like a consistency, and if you are consistently not getting your needs met, you are settling. Because is your partner going to meet your needs perfectly every single day 24/7 during that day? No, right? But you consistently, you want to be in a relationship where your needs are being met. And if they're not, that you're able to speak up and be like, hey, XYZ thing, I didn't like that. That felt like this for me. I need this. And then your partner is going to be like, oh my God, okay, of course. Yeah, I will do my best to do that for you. And if that's not happening, I would say you're settling.
that is a great answer to the question. What are the three things that you would say that in a partner would be healthy green flags?
Emotionally available, um, great communicator, meaning they're able to speak openly, directly, and honestly. And someone who is wanting to show up and do the work.
Beautifully
Like
said.
those three things are the most important, in my opinion. And I think the like everything else is sort of secondary, but like those, because those are foundational, right? You want someone who you can build trust with, and that person has to be able to be emotionally available to that, willing to do that, and able to communicate to you and keep their word so that you can see they are trustworthy and you can build that trust with them. Like that is everything. So not only is that important to look for, but that's also important to embody and be,
Yes. Yes.
right? Because we're not going to call that in if we're not there. Relationships are a mirror, and what they're mirroring is your internal relationship to self,
Love
right?
that.
So
Yes.
if you want to see something different externally, we don't do something different externally. We do something different internally, right? So the more loving we are. So, my relationship is so great because of the work I've done with myself, and I continue to do with myself, right? My partner is available and loves me and shows up for me because that's how I show up for me, right? And it is mirroring this relationship that I have built with myself. So, it's it's even more important, in my opinion, to be those things for yourself, right? To be emotionally available, to have that honest, open, direct communication with yourself. You got to be brutally fucking honest with yourself. You can't lie to yourself. Um, and you need to be willing to show up and like do the work.
That all makes sense. You even answered my follow-up question was, do you think somebody has to embody what is on their manifestation list, what they're calling in for a partner?
Yes. With a caveat of, again, we are not seeking perfection and we are not proving worth. So we are always at every single point and always will be and always have been worthy of everything, worthy of love and just maximum amount of worth, right? That worth is inherent, it's internal, and we always have the maximum amount. So there is never an X point we are getting to. It is literally a perspective shift. So that can happen in the
Yes.
moment. That's all, right? You just need one moment to be like, I'm worthy. So therefore, I'm going to show up and not lie. Cool. Like it's literally that. So it is not something that takes years. Not to say there's so many things that leads to that. Not to say that we're looking at timelines because the when and the how, not our business, so we're not paying attention over there. But it's just, I think people get caught up in this idea of, well, I'm not good enough now, so I have to wait until I'm good enough. And that is not true. You always have been, always will be, always are worthy in this exact moment. And you can recognize that right now. And doing that is what you need, because doing that then helps you be like, okay, well, now I am going to be available. So I'm going to reinforce that by being available in all my relationships, right? I'm going to reinforce that by being a healthy communicator in all my relationships, right? I'm going
Mm.
to be reinforcing that by showing up and doing the work in all my relationships, right? So it's like that is something that you can step into right fucking now.
Most people are waiting for the when I have the hit of
Yeah.
inspiration to have that moment of, oh yes, I am worthy, or when there's a lot of when, which again goes directly with the whole time thing, not the how,
Mm-hmm.
and the timeline is not your problem.
If you're saying I'll be when, you're putting your worth on that thing. Your worth isn't external. So it has to be pulled in. It's here. It's always internal, right? So it's never based on what you have it or what you're doing or what's happening to you. You always have it. Like an example I give, Trump, not making great choices, but a worthy person. He is a worthy human because he exists and he is here. He is not a good person. I don't want to hang out with him, but like he is a worthy person. I
And
certainly
that's
don't want him running
also
our country, but
right.
there you go. He's
But
worthy.
his awareness of his worthiness is what allows him to continuously show up no matter what anybody thinks of him.
Uh-huh. Like we wish he wouldn't, but here he is, right? And
And
so
yeah.
it's like we are all worthy and it's not based on anything external. So if you notice, you're like, well, I'll be happy when, right? And that can be super insidious. It can be like so teeny tiny back there. We have to recognize that because that is you saying, I'm not worthy, right? So we have to be able to like really pull that in.
So, who would be your ideal client? Like when somebody shows up, who do you think is either your ideal client or the client that is going to get the most results and benefit from coaching with you or under you?
I mean, I don't have an ideal client, but I think people are, you know, who are ready to be coached. So meaning they're really open, and they have some awareness, which they do if they're coming to seek a coach, right? But I do have people that perhaps have that awareness, but are not open to receiving, which is also okay, right? It's coaching therapy is very vulnerable. We're
It's very
exploring super
vulnerable.
vulnerable things. So I think it's a willingness to like really be vulnerable and look at yourself in a new way. But that's really all that it I think is important in order for someone to work with me.
So, visions, missions, and manifestations is very much
Mm-hmm.
about the listener coming to the realization that their ideas aren't just fleeting thoughts, but they're actually possibilities for themselves if they were to take action on it. And we're kind of moving humanity forward in breaking this belief that, you know, you have to stay stuck in the storyline that you're born into and that you're told and that you're molded into. And instead, you could break that reality and be whoever it is that you decide to be because you want to and what that looks like and going after it. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I admire so much about you is how you really stay very true to your wants and desires and take action
Mm-hmm.
on them. And I think that was really
Mm-hmm.
highlighted in today's conversation. But what are some extra little doses of advice that you'd give, or like pieces of wisdom that you'd give to the person who is like, I have such a past. How can I become whatever it is I want to become? Like people are going to judge
Mm-hmm.
me, or I'm going to continue to get backlash from my family and things like that.
Well, first of all, I would say there's a couple of things, and these are like, more like foundational steps. So, first and foremost, you need to work on your foundation, which is you're building your sense of safety and security internally. If you want to know how to do that, book a session with me. But that's like number one is really working on that. So that's like, being impeccable with your word, which like read the four agreements, super important. Learning how to build that sense of trust with yourself, learning how to deeply love yourself, learning how to recognize your inherent worth. That is going to be everything, because that will help you recognize that you were operating from wounds, and that isn't bad. That's not something to be ashamed of. That is what you learned how to do. And once you can build awareness around that and really, again, work on that foundation, you can start to shift and get into your truth and start to build new patterns that feel more aligned with that truth. And then to just like piggyback off that, you're saying like, oh, my family will judge me. Start holding motherfucking boundaries.
I love it.
Like start recognizing what those are. So that means you have to attune to yourself to understand what your needs are, to understand what your wants are, to understand what your desires are. And you have to trust that you are allowed to have those and that those are worthy because they are. And then a willingness to protect them and yourself by holding boundaries, right? And boundaries is how we have healthy, deep, intimate, satisfying relationships. Boundaries does not close relationship down. Boundaries is what allows relationships to be open. So we need to really learn how to understand what those are for us, express those, and maintain those for ourselves.
I always say I wish there was a class on self love and self worth in the
That's so
school
funny. I'm going
curriculum.
to do a workshop on self love. So
Sign me up.
come
Sign
in,
me up.
come in spring 2024.
Spring. Okay. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah.
And you definitely have to tell us more on how we could sign up to that. But before I ask you all about that, when I was working with you, you definitely instilled in my mind that some of the things that we learned as children, like maybe we were hyper aware as children because we had to be, because nobody else was paying attention, would end up being our superpowers. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one question I've been asking on this podcast is, what do you think is your superpower or your heightened sixth sense?
Mm. I think I have a couple superpowers. I think one of my superpowers is I can see patterns really well, always have. And that's what helps me do what I do. That's why I do what I do. That's what continues to drive me in this career and continue to learn and grow. So I think that's a superpower. And I think that stems from having to be hyper vigilant as a child. So always having to be like super fucking aware of like what, my caregivers were doing and like the shifts that they had. Um, and then also I think my other superpower is I'm a really good communicator and I'm really direct. I do not bullshit. I am not fake, which sounds awesome, but that can also be a double-edged sword because I can't be fake. So if I don't like someone, I don't like them, and I'm not going to pretend I do. I'm not going to try to make them feel comfortable. I'm going to just be like, I don't like you, and like leave it there. And that has not always proven to be a lot of people's favorite quality of mine. But it's something that I really love and respect about myself because when I do show up, like, you're getting the real deal. Like, where you stand with me. And I think that also stems from trauma. I never had certainty. I didn't know where I stood. There was a lot of gray, there was a lot of lying, there was a lot of bullshitting. And so from that, I was like, that is not the world I want to live in. Right. And not to say that I think gray is always bad. I think gray needs to be there. Things can't just be black and white, but I definitely, what you're getting with me, which I like super value. And that's really, as I get older, the only kind of people I want to be around. Like, if you're going to be one way to my face and one way behind, I have zero fucking time for that. Like, goodbye. No, thank you. I want what you have to give, even if that means you're going to tell me something that's hard to hear. That's fine. I can handle the truth. I cannot handle someone who isn't willing to tell the truth. That I'm unwilling to deal with. But if
Wow.
you want to tell me something difficult, like, hey, Amanda, you were a real bitch, I'll be like, okay, let's talk about that. I can deal with that. Cannot handle someone who's like, oh, hey, and then it's like, oh, baby. Nope. Like, nope, nope, nope. So I think those are my two superpowers.
And I think, especially the second one, it makes you more trustworthy. I think as a
Mm,
client of yours, that's what made me feel like, okay, this girl isn't, messing
yeah,
around here. She knows what she's
right.
talking about. She's very straight to the point. Like, and also it allows somebody once told me that your clients hide in your shadows. And I
Mm,
feel like because you did not have a shadow whatsoever around honesty and getting to the point almost, I, as a client, was unable to hide in storytelling, like started not even a
mm-hmm.
lie, but like creating stories around situations in my life. It was like, okay, great. I'm not here to listen to a whole story. So the point is, okay, and this is what we do about it. And that was
Yeah.
like life changing for me because it was like, oh, wait, we're not going to like say, okay, blame and shame and all the guilt that comes with telling this whole story. We're moving me out of victimhood. So I can't be the victim. I actually have to do something about all of this. And I think that's excellent. That's what people
Yeah,
want and need results, which is
totally.
what you get.
And just to say, I did used to have shadow about that. I used to, when I hadn't fully claimed that as a superpower, my directness, that got used against me so much. It got thrown in my face like all the time, especially in work. It would be like, oh, Amanda's dismissive, Amanda's rude, Amanda's cold, Amanda's too direct. It got thrown in my face all the time, all the time, all the time. And then once I claimed it, now that is what clients come to me and say, oh my God, you're so direct. I love it. Like, you're straightforward. I love it. Right. Like, now I'm celebrated for the thing because nothing changed except me owning it. But that's not to say that I don't still get people that are like, that don't like my directness. And to which I'm like, then I'm not for you.
Right.
Right. This is not something, and that has been like in friendship and in work. I've had friends be like, you're blunt. And I'm like, yep. And if you don't like it, then we shouldn't be friends. Cause like
Right.
I love that about myself. It's probably my favorite thing about myself. And I'm unwilling to change that. And I'm not cruel, right? I'm never going to say something to be cruel, right? I'm always going to always check in, right? Like, especially with friends. Now, as a coach and a future therapist, I'm like, do you want my advice? Because if you don't, like, I will just listen, right? So I always clarify. what are you looking for in this moment? Do you just want my support? Do you want validation? Or are you looking for my opinion? And if you're looking for my opinion, I will absolutely give it, but I'm not just like throwing it out willy nilly, right? Because I think that's also annoying. So if someone doesn't want that, I'm like, then we're not aligned anymore. Cause like that's all I have room for is someone who is going to show up that way and who is also looking for that in a person. And then with clients, if they're like, I don't like that directness, which happens, I'm just like, that is totally fine. Then I'm not the coach for you, which I think is great. And like, let's find you someone who is. So even after, just to say that, like, I think it's very important to like own the thing, you know, and own the thing that like people always throw on your face because there's a superpower hiding in there.
I love
But that doesn't mean that everyone will just, now everyone in the world will like accept that for you. But what will change is you'll be like, cool, then I don't need to be for you. And like, that's okay. And you know, you don't have to ever change that thing.
But you also make your life experience so much more better feeling when you stay true to what feels good for you. Like saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, okay, we're not like right for each other, even if it's just a relationship or a client, friendship or a client." You still get to now mold your life with characters and personalities and people who do feel good for you. And then
Yeah,
you're living a
absolutely.
life with people you like and nobody in it is somebody that you don't like. And that's so much
Right,
better. That's a better way of
right.
living.
Right. Or that makes you, that tries to like make you feel bad about yourself. Like
Hmm.
I don't want that. And nor do I want to do that to anybody. Right. Like what a waste of this like precious life we have. I only want to celebrate and lift people up. And I only want to be around people that want to celebrate me and lift me up, which is
I,
not to say like that you're not helping each other grow and having a hard conversation. Right. I'm not blowing smoke up anyone's ass again. I'm not a bullshitter, nor do I accept someone bullshitting me. But I'm never ever gonna just like tear someone down for like for the sake of it, right? Like I'll have a hard conversation with someone for sure, but I'm not cruel and I'm not looking for cruel people. And I think there's a difference between being honest and direct and cruelty. But I think people forget that. So they're like, oh, if I'm honest, then they're gonna think I'm mean. And it's like, are you being mean? Right? Or are you just telling your truth? And some people aren't going to like that, and that's okay. They don't need to. We don't
yeah.
need to be codependent. And I think I think being nice is something different. Being nice is people pleasing, right? And that will get women killed. So I think women need to embrace being a bitch, which isn't actually being a bitch. Like, think about what a bitch is. I mean, she's direct. She fucking speaks up for herself. She says what she means, right? That's actually being kind. That's like kind communication. It's just gotten this label because the patriarchy, misogyny, and blah.
Oh, for sure.
So, stepping, really thinking about being open and being direct and being honest, but like coming from that kind place, which means I'm not going to go out of my way if I see a friend who's doing something that I don't agree with. I'm not going to go like lay down the truth for them unless they ask me, like,
Right.
hey, this is happening and I'm feeling really lost and like I really need guidance. Like, can you tell me what you think? Then absolutely. But I'm not going to like seek them out and be like, hey, here's what you're doing wrong. Because that's not being kind. That's me trying to avoid myself by
Hmm.
focusing on someone else's flaws.
Hmm.
Right. And like, that's just me avoiding my own, is what that is.
For
So
sure.
I think there's a lot of balance in it, right? Of like being direct and being open, and being honest, and like not disguising being honest as like being cruel or trying to control someone either. Like I think
For
that's important too.
sure. And delivery also is something that's
Mm-hmm.
important, Definitely working on taking away the judgment of what somebody is saying or doing from how I feel about what they're saying and doing, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that does, right? Like when X happens, I feel blank.
Right.
So that's more like a nonviolent way to communicate. And if no one has, or if someone hasn't read Nonviolent Communication, please go out. It's such a good resource to learn how to nonviolent communicate. So versus saying like when you do blah, 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 when that's going to make someone feel defensive, that's going to make someone feel attacked. You're not going to have a productive conversation from that. But if you can, again, be nonviolent, say when X gets said, when X gets done, it really makes me feel unheard or unseen or, terrible or whatever it is. that there's much more room for that person to like come meet you there and also be vulnerable, right? Versus like, oh, I'm not doing that, or whatever defense they have going on.
And showing up in that way is also a version of loving yourself,
100%.
giving yourself the space and the permission to like speak your truth. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like is so important, especially for women, like you said, who are shut down a lot of the time or don't feel
Mm-hmm.
like they have a voice in a conversation that's being had.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
So I'm definitely curious in hearing your vision and your mission with coaching and becoming a therapist and
Mm-hmm.
what's in store for Amanda Blair in the future.
Um, well, and just to clarify, I do think having resolutions are fine, but I just think that we should like have seasonal resolutions.
Yes.
Um, so for me, what I'm really looking forward to is I start an internship in June for therapy for school, and I'm very, 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 very excited on that. So like about that, I'm really that's where I'm really like thinking about what I'm focused on. And it really is just going to be, learning as much as I can because inside of that internship, I have, supervisors. So I'm going to be getting a lot of guidance, a lot of mentorship, which I love. And so I'm very excited to learn and grow and, become more useful and get more tools so I can serve clients more. And I will still be coaching for a little bit into that, but I will be transitioning, as um, as that process develops into just therapy full time, because
Wow,
that will just take up all my
congratulations.
time. Yeah. So, and I will probably always work with individuals, but I am going to focus mostly on couples, which I'm very, very, very excited about.
I saw that on your
So that'll
site.
be my focus. Yeah.
And so, will you be taking any of the manifestation background and education that you've
Of
been
course.
teaching into
Yeah.
the, yeah.
I mean, that is the way that I operate in the world. That is how I live. I would say, even, though I sort of learned about manifestation through TBM originally, all those years and years ago, that I have really moved away from that version of it. And I have like sort of my own philosophy around it, which is what I teach and talk about with clients and what I will continue to. I think, as a therapist, that's not going to be something that I impart on a client unless they're asking for it and they want it. But it definitely informs just me and my life. So that will always be something that I can speak to and teach about if it's desired.
And I'm sure you get this question all the time. Are you going to be accepting insurance? What does that look like? Because this is a whole new realm for
Oh,
you.
yeah. As a therapist, probably. I mean, when I'm in my internship, yes, because that is
Right.
what the center I will be working at does. But as a therapist, I would say probably initially, yeah. The thing with insurance that I don't love is it's very focused on diagnoses, and
Mm,
I don't necessarily agree with that. It's also if you're working with a couple, that's like it makes it really hard, or like a family, it makes it very hard to do that. It sort of pigeonholes someone to put someone in a box. A diagnosis can also follow someone around that can like deeply affect their life. And sometimes a diagnosis is needed, but a lot of times it's not. And so
yeah.
that focus from the insurance isn't my favorite part, but I know that it does make therapy accessible. I probably won't work with insurance always, but I will find ways to, make it accessible for someone if it's not, without that. And even if I don't work with insurance, like I can always give a super bill so that that person could get reimbursed by their insurance company.
Beautiful. And I know we touched a little bit on the workshop that you're creating for the spring of
Mm.
2024. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I'm still building it, but I'm the way that it's going to work, I think, is I'm going to do so it's going to be like 2 Saturdays, like an hour each. I'm going to do a very small group to start, so maybe like 5 people. Um, and it's going to be all about self-love and just what that means, how to do that, what that looks like in life. And that's why I want it to be really small so that it can be really intimate and everyone can get a lot of one-on-one time with me, and also with each other. I think, in that, building a little community and having that is so helpful.
So
So yeah, that's sort of the structure that I think it'll be, and it'll have cool tools and all the things. And I'm hoping to do that in, I think, like March or April, but follow me on Instagram, Amanda Blair. Go to my website, amandablaircoaching.com. It'll be there. I'll be announcing when I do it. But it will be a small group to start. And then depending on how it goes, I might, do it more and then like have bigger groups.
Last question is this, your purpose. So how do you feel your purpose is in coaching and being a therapist and being a voice of guidance?
My purpose is to help people recognize their worth, their inherent worth, and to deeply fall in love with themselves and let that be the foundation of which they lead a life from, of a place of I am deeply worthy inherently. So I have to do nothing to prove that or achieve that. I just am. And I also deeply love myself, because from there is like so much beauty, and just like really, I guess it's like letting people recognize like they are the magic.
Hey, if you like this podcast episode, please download it, give us a nice review, and follow us on Instagram at JourneyWithVRD to get all the latest and the greatest updates. Till next week.